Hi class, so in this module we will begin our study of the different phases of the feminist movement, and we will also look at stories that were written during each phase and kind of study them, right, parallel. We'll look at how the dynamics of the phase kind of gave writers more freedom. And we'll look at how the stories written kind of provided more notoriety, I guess, to the movement itself. So there's kind of like a symbiotic relationship, I think, between the two. All right. So talk a little bit about feminism in literature, its role. So one of the main things that critics began to look at was how writers, both male and female, how they supported the discrimination or how they might have opposed it. And that's something that you can think about for the second lecture for this module. And they asked several questions, such as why are female writers less significant? And as writers kind of, I guess, began to be seen as equal to males, Showalter kind of talks about those three phases, and the first one was kind of like the imitation phase. So a lot of female writers basically just copied what men did, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, that's probably a natural progression, right? Just to say, well, look, men get all the credit for doing this, different kind of literary techniques, stream of consciousness, just things like that. And women sought to prove that they could do that as well. And what else is kind of interesting is there was a little bit of friction, too, going on between the feminist movement and the abolitionist movement. There's kind of a break. And I just thought of that because of the black writers and many of the slave narratives, that was kind of the same thing. The slave narratives were trying to produce writing that the white males did. So, although they are both trying to achieve the same thing, there was a little bit of friction between the two, as many thought that the feminist movement kind of took some of the steam away from the abolitionist movement, sorry. And finally, one of the concerns is how the social conditions and the literary traditions have affected one another. So that's when I was talking about that whole parallel movement. All right. How it arrived, it gained steam in the 1960s. Pre-1960 was limited to female writers, and looked at the condition of women in society. Prior to this, right, so prior to the 1960s, the condition of women in society was expressed through situations faced by female characters. So if you wanted to know anything about a woman, you would just read a novel. And since most novels were written by males, that was kind of problematic. And many males kind of adopted Freud's, I think he calls it the hysteria, right, or something like that. The idea that women are more irrational, emotional, and things like this. And when you have the dominant discourse, right, which is written by males, they can pretty much do whatever they want. But here, right, in our final point, feminism, right, once it kind of made its way into the literary form, made it so the social, the cultural, the educational, professional, and financial aspects of society, right, were looked at with the intent to expose the patriarch. So it spanned, right? So that's kind of that relationship that I talked about earlier. Okay, and for this week we have the first phase of feminism, and our main concern, right, or the main concern for the first wave was the treatment of women at the hands of male members of society. And of course, the big one, the first wave contained the women's suffrage movement. And that's why I have that picture there. Critics during the time considered the ways in which novelists discriminate against and marginalize women characters. And of course, we can see this in the short story form as well. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening.